I got the I-beam welded up onto the columns, the pilings. The next step is to put these, I don't know what these would be called, purlins or something like that, on there. But they're pretty rusty, so I wanted to get the rust off of them before I put them up. It's too cold and wet to paint them, but you get them cleaned up and most of the heavy loose rust off of them, and then they can be easier to clean up and paint when the weather warms up and once we get them dried in up there. Well, I got these channel iron beams all wire brushed down pretty clean. It took me longer than I had hoped to get them done. I thought I would be able to get them done and get them up to the house and get started laying them out up there, but it's getting late here and I gotta go get cleaned up, go to my son's for Christmas dinner, so I'm not gonna get it done. It'll be dark here in a few minutes anyway. I wasn't gonna paint these till after I got them all up there, but I got to looking at them and decided to go ahead and put a rust conversion coat on it. It's a coat called Seal, and I've used it on some parts and stuff that I've done for some of the commercial fishing boats. I used it on the frame of my son's truck that was all rusted up, and we never did finish the truck, but it's set up here out in the weather for 20 years and it still looks pretty good out there, the frame that we cleaned up. I wanted to get something on the back side of the pads here that get bolted up to the house because we won't be able to get anything on them, so I decided to go ahead and do the whole thing. There was some pretty good pits and stuff in that thing and it rusts up pretty fast. Anyway, I washed it down real good with some paint thinner a couple of times, and then I took the oxyacetylene torch and a rosebud on it, heated it up to evaporate the paint thinner off of it, and that warmed the metal up. And so I want to put the Seal on there. It's setting up pretty good. Ordinarily with it this cold and stuff, it'd take days for it to set up, but that stuff's starting to harden up already, so that's good. So that stuff will be protected, and it'll probably be a few days now before we can do anything with it. It's supposed to warm up and start raining again. Oh, maybe it'll get rid of this snow and stuff, but these will get bolted on to the rim joist around the bottom of the house and then welded down onto that channel iron that I welded up there on the pilings. So I'll have to grind that out, and then I'll have to make some kind of brackets to hold the floor joists up with, and I'm going to weld those on there too, so we'll have to grind. But I would have had to ground those anyway to get it through the rust that was left over on there. So got a little break in the weather today between storms here, I guess. It's supposed to be raining or snowing right now. It's been raining and blowing for the last 2 or 3 days, and then before that we got about 8 inches of snow. Well, I couldn't really work under the eaves of that house with all that snow overhanging there ready to come down and the water dripping down. And since we got a break today, decided to go ahead and see if I could get them up here and set up. I've got the first one up there lined up, and that one was easy because I've got the little sidewalk and all of the backfill around the house right up there. I'm just able to block it up with some boards and have it lined up where it goes. The second one is a little bit more of a challenge. I'm going to have to reach overhead to hang it up there to get it up where it goes. If I was lag bolting those into the rim joists, that would be no problem, but I'm going to through bolt those with a big heavy bearing washer on the inside. Oh, I've got the rim joists is the double rim joists. They're full 2x12 spruce, and the inside one is nailed into my floor joist in the basement, and then the outside one is cross nailed into it. So I got to go through 4 inches of those, and I can't see where my floor joists are nailed into the beam there through this outside one because there's no through nails on it. It's just cross nailed into that inside rim joist. This one here, this first one, is not a problem. I can see where it goes, and I've got it laid out where I wanted. I took and measured 8 feet from my corner back for the second one, but again, I can't really see where the floor joists are on there, so I just went inside and I took a aviation drill bit, just an 1/8 inch long, 12-inch long drill bit, and drilled through the bay where I want that one to go, so I've got an indicator where it's at. So now I can go set it up. I've got some of that they call plumber's tape. It's a metal galvanized tape with perforations in it every inch or so, used for hanging up plumbing pipe and things like that. And I've got some of it I'm going to nail into my rim joist and run around the bottom of that beam and then nail it in on the other side and kind of hold that as like a saddle up where it goes. Well, those 3 channel beams are in place. They're where I want them to be. I got that third one, the farthest one down, lined up the same way I did the middle one. I went in and found the bay that was closest to the 16-foot mark, the middle of that building. Run my aircraft drill bit up through the rim joist. I was able to see that and line that beam up with it and get it hung up there. The middle one, I got it hung up with some of that plumber's tape, but the far one there was kind of high up in the air and it's kind of difficult to handle. I was able to get it up there in position, and I just put a deck screw through there, number 8 deck screw in through the top hole to suspend it up there, and it's lined up where it's supposed to be. I came back to this first one and drilled my first 1/2-inch hole through the rim joist on there and put a bolt through it. And I went to drill out the other 2 holes there, and my drill bit won't fit in there. I drilled those holes out through that plate with a 13mm drill bit, figuring that a 1/2-inch bolt and drill bit would fit right through it, but the 1/2-inch auger won't go through it. I'm using carriage bolts, and the hole is too small to swedge the carriage bolts into the hole. I was figuring if the hole was big enough that I could just hit that carriage bolt with a hammer and kind of swedge it into the hole so it wouldn't turn, but it wouldn't do that. This first one, I moved the beam over out of the way. I marked the top hole, moved the beam over out of the way and drilled it, and then slid it back and put the bolt in it to line it up. But I wanted to use the other holes to line up their holes through the rim joist. That's not going to work. So I'm going to run to town and get a 5/8 reduced shank drill bit. And it's too late to do anything more here anyway. It's getting dark now. It's 3:30. It's going to be too dark to do anything here in a few minutes anyhow, so I couldn't have finished that up. Well, it's getting dark again, but I got those beams up there. I had to go to town yesterday and get 5/8-inch reduced shank drill bit so I could open up those holes in the flanges so that the auger would fit through them, and so that I could kind of swedge those squares on the carriage bolts into them. That rim joist is kind of recessed in from the walls a little bit. The foam on the walls stands proud of that a little bit. It's about 1/2 inch or a little more. So I decided to get something to use as a spacer in there so that those would fit flush up against that foam insulated forms. So I decided to get some treated 3/4 inch plywood. All I needed was 3 sections, a 6-inch square. I looked around here for over an hour and couldn't find that piece, so thought I'd go to town and get one from the lumber yard. Well, I got there and got to checking with them, and they wanted over $100 a sheet for a sheet of 3/4 inch treated plywood. Oh, I come back home and looked again and wound up calling the neighbor, and he had a scrap piece there that I went and got and cut up. So I put those in behind these beams, the pads on them, and drilled through them all at the same time. I've got all my holes drilled through and all my bolts run through there. I got real big, thick, heavy washers for the inside and the nuts, and I put washers and nuts on one of the bolts on each one of those and pulled them in tight. And I came out before I did that and squared up these beams with the house. I used a 3-4-5 triangle to square up those beams with the side of the house, and then marked that I-beam on there and swung those over to the side, got my grinder and ground that down to clean metal on that I-beam. Then I went in and put those big washers and bolts on those beams and tightened those down as tight as I could get them. And then I come out and set these beams, these channel iron beams, on the I-beam and got the welder out and welded those down so they're square to the house. I've got them all set there where they belong. They're all squared up and welded down. I was going to think about getting some 16-foot treated 2x8s from the lumber yard, but those are $50 a piece, and they only had 4 of them. I need 5 to run on 2-foot centers on this thing, so I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do there. Either mill up some lumber, or anyway, I'll see what I'm going to do there for that to put the floor joist down. But I want to get those set up, and I still want to weld tabs on these channel irons for the floor joist to be screwed into. This is what I'm using to mount my stringers onto the wall, onto the rim joist with. I've got a 7-inch galvanized carriage bolt, and then I've got a nut on the inside of it, but we'll use this for a washer on the inside against the wood for bearing surface. So you can see that provides a pretty good bearing surface there. That's 2.5 inches in diameter on that, and it's a thick piece of metal. I think it's cast iron, and it's galvanized, so it's made for like boats and stuff. Has a hole in it here that you can put a screw or a nail in to keep it from spinning. Anyway, that goes up against the wood, the nut goes on that, or that goes over the bolt, the nut goes over that, and that provides a pretty good bearing surface. It spreads the load out on the wood so it doesn't pull that nut through. And unlike a regular fender washer or a large washer, they get bent, distorted, and they'll still pull into the wood. And this is not going to bend, at least not with the force I can put on it. So this is what it looks like where it comes through the wall. Those things are a little bit close together. I wished I had them a little farther apart. They're so close together I had to mark those and grind them out a little bit to nest around that mother one, the first one there. Anyway, that's what the bay looks like. Now that one's all closed in now and tightened down, so I can put the insulation back in there in that cavity, and I'll move on to the next ones. Okay, here's the channel iron beams, and this is the way they attach to the house, to the wall. There's 3 carriage bolts there that go through that rim joist, and a piece of the treated plywood there as a spacer. Then they come out and rest on that I-beam. And I've got those welded into the I-beam. Right there, like that. I got them welded in around, all the way around the channel in the I-beam. And then they cantilever out over a foot over that I-beam. The next step is to get my floor joist down on there, and I was gonna kind of cheat and go buy some treated 2x8s, but the lumber yard only had 4 of them, and I need a minimum of 5. This is an 8-foot span, so if I go on 2-foot centers, 8 divided by 2 is 4, plus you need 1 for the inside edge or the outside edge, so that's 5. And I'm thinking I might double up the one on the outside edge here, because that's going to carry a pretty good load on it. If I double it up, it'll probably be better. But the lumber yard only had 4 of those, and they're $50 each. Checked with the hardware store. What are you barking at? Huh? What are you barking at? Oh yeah, what are you doing? Huh? What are you doing? Oh, that's my girl. That's my girl. Yeah. So I checked with the hardware store. They carry lumber here too. They didn't have any treated boards. So I got a pretty good yellow cedar there. I can just go ahead and cut my own. I just have to work on the sawmill to get it running. Oh, Saki!